Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Unmuted. I'm very excited to be back again this week. As you know, we're trying to do at least once a week. I think they're averaging out about to twice a week now, which is great. So this week, or I guess last week, or earlier this week, I should say, we talked about Health Canada, and I said I was going to talk about the FDA next, but I think I'll save that for next week, to start off next week. First off, I want to say a big thank you to Member of Parliament Arnold Viersen. Over the summer, as I've mentioned before in earlier episodes, we sent out a petition asking for more from the federal government to be done on the efforts of, ALS, and hopefully they listened, but I'm very thankful that most of these petitions went to the Office of Arnold Viersen. I'm happy to say we at least got enough to get one petition presented. So thank you, Mr. Viersen, for your help, and thank you to your office for facilitating that for us and getting that in for us. It's greatly appreciated, and I hope to be sending more your way and to your colleagues' way in the near future. And we hope to have Arnold on in the near future as well to talk about what he's been fighting with. That I believe he would agree with me saying a very silent issue that shouldn't be silent, and of course that's the troubles with human trafficking. And I'd love to dive into that deeper in the near future, and you know, some of the stuff I've learned about human trafficking is, of course, you know, we think it's in some faraway world and doesn't exist in Canada. How shocked you'd be, and how it exists and the methods used. And I hope to have him on talking about that. Maybe we'll talk about that in a few weeks or so. I was going to talk about the FDA today, and I thought that can be put on hold, because you know, I was scrolling through Facebook, looking through my feed, and I saw a post that really struck a chord with me, and thought, you know, I should probably do something. I really want to talk about it. So here I am. So we're doing on this course on this Tuesday here. We're talking about where I was planning on talking about the FDA. We're going to talk about something else, and we'll talk about the FDA on Sunday in the American and all that. And their process with Neurone, and how frustrating that's been. But right now, I really want to get into a topic that I found really interesting. And so essentially the post was, as it reads, it just doesn't have to affect you for you to care about it. And that really got me kind of thinking in a way that's really, you know, how we tend to think of things. We only matter till it affects us. And I don't really blame anyone for that, because of course I am also a victim to that. I wasn't really an ALS advocate till it affected me. And I guess the purpose of this, as I said before in the first episode, the whole purpose of this podcast is to break that stigma. But I want to go deeper into the point of how this only really seems to affect the only people seem to really care is who it affects. And of course, you know, it's not just ALS. I mean, we're talking about, there's plenty of diseases and issues out there that it doesn't get covered because Hollywood doesn't deem it good enough for Parliament or presidents or whatever, or power or influencers don't deem it important enough, because either A, there's not enough people affected by it, or B, there's just not seen worth it, or it's just not affected their lives. And it really seems to be a problem, I think, facing us, that how much we rely on influencers and people of high status or power, high power, on how we what issues matter to us. And it's in a way quite sad that we rely on actors and athletes and politicians and influencers to tell us what's important. And I mean, that's the whole point. Me starting this is, you know, hopefully become an influencer, so these issues that others deem not worthy enough somehow get into the spotlight the way they do. And it's quite upsetting, really. And yeah, it just was a post that really made me want to talk about this again, because I know I talked about it in the first episode. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably, and you haven't checked out Spotify yet, you probably didn't hear me talk about this, but I think it is a problem, especially in our kind of modern society, that we only deem stuff worthy if people of importance deem it worthy. And I mean, in the case of ALS, it's been around for 150 years, so this is nothing new. Yet, I mean, and I find people do take advantages, especially on social media. They took advantage of, for example, the Ice Bucket Challenge. Now, I didn't know what it was at the time either, but, I did have my parents, I don't think I was ever nominated. If I did, I didn't do it. Mainly because, my sister at the time was nominated, and I just remember she wanted to do it. So my parents said, well, are you donating the money? And so it kind of clicked, I think, for both my sister and myself, that, oh, this is actually a charity. Like, this is to raise not just awareness, but money. But when I realized, I look back at that time, because all my friends were, or at least most of them were doing it at the time. I don't think a single person that I can really watch social media actually ever knew what they were dunking ice water on their head for. Like, they just, here's the Ice Bucket Challenge. But there was no, like, yeah, this is for ALS, maybe in the beginning, and the people who actually knew it was for, but, it kind of opened my eyes recently that people were doing this as a social media fad. And it's just a shame that's what it turned into, because it was meant to be awareness and raising money for ALS, and how many people actually donated while doing that challenge. And that's actually why I didn't do the challenge, because I believe I was nominated, but I refused to do it because I didn't have any money. And secondly, I didn't know what it was for, and I didn't really want to participate in something like that without donating, as my parents pointed out. So, it's but it's a shame that's what these things get turned into, is what's meant to be raising awareness. And yes, the Ice Bucket Challenge got huge, but how many people who participated could say they knew that was for ALS? At least when I was, because when that happened, I was a teenager. So at that point, it really wasn't, and I mean, I don't know how many people would actually admit they didn't know, because we kind of live in the world where, we'll deny that kind of stuff. But honestly, how many people actually knew what they were dunking their ice on heads for? Or did most of you think it was just a fun internet challenge that just happened to be rising up? I think that's the problem with a lot of these, is we turn them into stuff to gain our own popularity, when that's not the point. And actually, that does bring me to my second point of what's super disappointing is a lot of people. I think the whole issue for a lot of these diseases and issues is people want to take the credit for it. So a lot of this stuff gets halted and delayed and slowed down because someone needs to take credit, and if they're not going to get credit, they're going to try and delay it and slow it down till they're recognized as the ones who are going to be taking the credit. And I mean, and I have seen that, especially with ALS, is if people aren't getting the credit, they're going to slow it down, or they're going to halt things down, or try and divert it so they can get attention because they want fame and glory. And I have to say, if you're working as and not just advocates like myself who do that, which there are, believe me, but doctors, people who have sworn oaths to protect people, in my opinion, spit on that oath because they want fame and glory, which is a huge problem, frankly. So, it puts us into this position where popularity and fame become a very big problem, because we take in a selfish aspect of, well, I want to be the one to have brought in this treatment. I want to be the one who took in the cure. And, I mean, it might be a reason why cancer is taking so long. People say, it could be pharmaceutical companies not wanting, because, it's an endless cash cow. But I think it also might be countries want to take credit for causing the cure, so they try and slow it down. I 100% believe that's in some minds. Why these treatments and cures get slowed down is because certain people want the credit and want the fame and want the glory, want the Nobel Prize or whatever the heck they give away for that, and things get slowed down and delayed. But it's unfortunate that we have some people that would rather have their own reputation, have their own glory or money or power, whatever you want out of it, over what needs to be done and what should be done to help people. And what's sad is this is not just influencers or people on YouTube or Facebook, Twitter, all that. They're doctors, politicians, people who work in offices, government offices, and people who claim to care about people. I'm not saying that's everybody in the fields such as Health Canada, FDA, or doctors or people in charge of trials and treatments and all politicians. We started off the show with a very, congratulatory of a good MP, a good politician who is doing what he can to help people. And, I hope to have him on soon. So if you're listening, Arnold, let's clear schedule. But I'm not sure he's actually listening. So prove me wrong, Arnold. Anyway, but to go into it, I think what we really need to do is change, frankly, the idea of, how these challenges, are to. I think the biggest problem with the Ice Bucket Challenge, which did raise a lot of money, and it was a good idea. Don't get me wrong. I thought it's amazing. It's a great way to raise awareness. But sometimes I think it needs to be more clear what this is for, because you do get young people now on the internet who just see this as a fad. I mean, we see how easily they can be coaxed into things. Like, look at the dang eating detergent, the Tide Pods, licking soap during the height of COVID, the licking shelves challenge. Just the stupid stuff and misinterpretation is so easy. And I mean, not even just teenagers. I think some adults, frankly, start these fads and, start these misconceptions. So, it's not just kids, but the kids are the most impressionable. I probably butchered that. So apologies. But, I don't know. I mean, I think what we really have to do is change the stigma of a lot of, what is truly important. And I think it's a real problem. We only follow certain challenges or fads or issues that are only big because it affects a large amount of people. And I mean, I've seen the numbers for ALS. They seem to be growing every year. Every year I talk to more people. It seems like every person I talk to now has someone affected with ALS, it seems. And it's growing. But my biggest issue is a lot of people, don't really care. And I don't really blame them, because that was me at one point. But, they say they don't care because it has, it hasn't affected me. And, I was in that attitude. And, I usually tell my story because, I sit there and say, well, I was you. I didn't think it would affect me either. I thought it was going to come nowhere near me, but look, it did. So I think the biggest thing with ALS and a lot of these issues like human trafficking and, these rare diseases is never assume it's not going to come to you. Because it can, That's why it's important to highlight these issues and fight for stuff like treatments and have easier access to treatments. Because when it starts to come, we can actually help more people. And it's unfortunate that it seems like we have to fight the societal norms and even our own governments, multiple. I mean, the United States is being just as stubborn on this issue as we are in Canada, which we'll get to next week. But we have to fight these kind of stigmas in our own governments, for crying out loud, just to get a simple treatment that is currently taking effect in another country and is working in another country. But because we have to sit here and do our own 2-year review for some reason, even though it's working, it's proven to work in a country that invented it. I mean, my adage is, if it works in Israel with the medical side, it's about 99% a good chance that it's good. I mean, the Israelis have done a lot for medically. for us. I mean, we wouldn't have antibiotics without the Israelis. So, frankly, if they're working on something and it's working, why even waste time reviewing it? But we know why. We know why Health Canada wants to waste time. We know why our government wants to waste time because they want to say we reviewed it and we didn't. It's us. We're taking responsibility for it, and we're going to get all the glory. But if it looks like it's going to fail, we're going to cut it so we don't get any blame. And frankly, that's the biggest problem. When I was in Parliament, I was trying to get some of these things passed, trying to get letters written, and frankly, and I'm not just saying it's just the government that blocked us. I am going to call this person out because they actually did block a lot of work. And I don't normally like to call people out, but I did call out Patty Hajdu, and I am going to call out the critic of health in the last Parliament, because she was actually a big blocked a lot of what that could have been done and out a lot sooner. And it's disappointing. So in the last Parliament, Aaron O'Toole appointed Michelle Rempel-Garner as the Shadow Minister for Health. I was somewhat disappointed in how at least her office chose to handle that file. I understand we were in the midst of COVID and that took priority. But it seemed that Mrs. Rempel-Garner, MP Rempel-Garner, seemed to want to take the same stance as Patty Hajdu, which is we don't want to advocate for things specifically in case they go wrong because then we get blamed. I essentially, and I'd love to have some of the doctors on this podcast in the near future talking about the Healy trial, but essentially we were trying to advocate because the Healy trial wants to come into Canada, and they're starting the process. All we were asking of MP Rempel-Garner's office was, will you help just sign on a letter? Just approving this letter, because sometimes, we're trying to respect her shadow cabinet position and just go on and say, just approve this letter supporting the Healy trial. Don't even need to sign it. Are we okay just to write this? They didn't want to because they didn't want to take any responsibility. Their name wasn't even going to be on the dang thing, but apparently they didn't like it. So Rempel-Garner's office did make it hard for these things to get through. A bit of me, and she's not the health critic this time around, and we need to definitely look into the new health critic and the new health minister, because last Parliament, they were disappointing. No one wants to take responsibility. And if we're not willing to take responsibility, we'll take responsibility for lower taxes, or we'll take responsibility for housing plans, or we only take responsibilities when we know 100% they're good. If that's how our governments are going to continue in the future, we're hooped as people. I mean, let's look in the past. I mean, if you just look at the past, from John A. Macdonald all the way up to I mean, even up to Stephen Harper. These are prime ministers, whether you like them or not. And this is not a point of, I'm not talking about the points of debates of whether you like them or not. They took chances that they know that they could have absolutely failed and totally gotten just crucified for on their decisions. Like Sir John A. Macdonald, when he created Canada, took a huge risk by American influences in the South, the British possibility of the British not being on board and totally ruining his political career, separated Canada and invasion from the South. He took chances and took very big gambles and risks. And he even got blamed for some scandals by using Americans to build the Canadian Railway out west. But still, he got reelected eventually because people understood the risk he took was actually for the greater good of uniting Canada. And I mean, a bunch of prime ministers took risks in our history. But now it seems our governments, even our opposition, don't want to take these risks. We don't want to speak for this in case it fails. And I mean, for ALS, it borderline's pathetic that they're not willing to take the risk. What's the worst that could happen if it doesn't go well? I mean, in full honesty, people of ALS are dying. And forgive my language, but take the damn risk. I mean, seriously, what is the worst that's going to happen if something were to go wrong or some side effects? The side effect of ALS on its own is death. So what are you afraid of the risks of standing for this issue? It bothers me. It bothers me so much. And it's a waste of a seat for a member of parliament. It is. It's a waste of a seat if you're going to sit there and not do anything. And I think a lot of MPs, I shouldn't say a lot, I think there are a number of MPs that need to be reminded that you're there to represent your constituents. And it means taking risks, even if your party doesn't like it. But I mean, it's a sad shame that our party system here, at least here in Canada, has become, I'm going to kiss the butt of the leader just to get a good seat. And I mean, there is something about party loyalty that needs to be, I understand. Don't get me wrong. But we also need to take risks as, as people. Because we're coming to a point where I don't want to support it because it could be deemed as risky. And I mean, if ALS treatments are now seen deemed as too risky, we're at a problem. We really are. And I am super disappointed in how the previous Parliament's health critics, I never got a chance to meet with the NDP health critic. To be fair, they never actually would never return any of my emails or calls. So I can't say that in itself is disappointing. And a number of the members of the ALS caucus refused to meet with me. So, or even refused to get back to me. I'm not going to name those names because I'm going to try again, and hopefully someone can share them this podcast and realize how important it is to actually meet with these people and how important their job is on the ALS caucus. But, yeah. But all I can say is I'm super disappointed. I mean, I'm disappointed in society as a whole because, I mean, we seem to only care about issues that affect a majority of people. And, I mean, it's sad that that's what it takes. It takes people to do this, what I'm doing now, to build awareness for it. Even though this disease has been over 150 years old, even famous people have gotten this disease. Members of Parliament have gotten this disease back in 2017. Not too long ago, a member of Parliament sitted around a number of people sitting in the House right now who knew someone with ALS, and yet we're still having troubles passing treatments for it. Like, this isn't a disease that's rarely back in backwater rural places and down in the States and out in Europe. It happened in our own House of Commons Parliament, where I know a number of people I met with said, yeah, I remember that. And, I mean, yet we still did nothing about it. Yay, we signed a motion saying we care about the issue. I'm sorry, but boo frickin' who? I don't want you to say, and this is the problem with our governments nowadays. We stand in solidarity. We're going to say a bunch of words, and hopefully that'll accept people enough to just go away. But I encourage people, don't go away. Don't take their word for it. Don't take a politician's word for it. Believe me, and because the politicians I really admire and follow don't talk. They do, right? And I know that, and I know, let's look at Team End ALS. They just didn't talk. They did it. They said, yeah, let's do this. Keep me in the loop. And I have to say they've all been very good about it. And I really appreciate the 19 MPs, and especially Tamara Jensen as well, counting her being unelected, which was unfortunate. Because I know she would have done a great job continuing her work with ALS as well. But, we can't just sit and take people's words for it anymore. And I really hope that we get more advocates on platforms like this talking about ALS and these other rare illnesses and really put on the back burner issues in our societies right now. And as I said, I'm really looking forward. I'm in talks right now of getting some MPs and influencers on this podcast, hopefully sooner rather than later, so we can actually start discussing more issues and the effects it has on with these certain kind of people here and those issues there. So, and yeah, it's sad that we have to come to this point. And I know I mentioned this is probably in episode 1, and if you're listening on Spotify, it's probably a bit repetitive of the first one, but I don't really care because I think it still needs to be said. It does. And it is a shame that we have to continue to fight for something like this. You know, as I said back in episode 1, I expected a disease like ALS to get headlines, front pages. But no, even when it is something in the newspaper, it's not even close to the first 3 pages, usually. It's quite rare. I mean, what's it going to take before people take this seriously? I don't know if it ever will, unless we start demanding of our society that we take a stand on it, which it shouldn't have to come to in the first place. But unfortunately, is where we're going to have to be in the first place. And that's the sad truth of, you know, I guess the society, not just we're in, but that we built. We built this. It's our own fault, but it's us to correct it. And what we need to do. And we start for demanding better of our public figures, demanding better of our politicians, and demanding better of society in general. That we take these issues seriously and stop putting stuff on the back burner because it's just not affecting us yet. And I say yet because it will. I guarantee everyone who hasn't been affected by ALS yet, you will be eventually. So why wait till it's affected you to do something about it when you can get on it now? And when it eventually affects you, there's a solution ready, so you don't have to sit and do what I do and wait to hear the 2 years discussion of when a cure is coming. And let's be honest, it's probably not coming in 2 years. It's probably going to be 10 years or so. Let's get real of ourselves here. And yeah, but you know, it's sad in general, but I'm optimistic of the work I do here. And as I said before, you know, I do this to get it canceled. I want this show to be canceled eventually, this podcast, because that's the aim. It should be canceled. I shouldn't have to talk about this anymore. I'm hoping it comes to a day where people can go, yeah, we already know this. Why are you talking about it? You know, that's the goal. But, you know, unfortunately, I don't see that happening for a few years now. And that's if this becomes successful. And here's hoping, you know, it does, not for the sense of, you know, for me becoming any form of popular influencer, but so more people are aware of the issue. And I mean, the second part of this is to realize that, you know, anyone who is facing challenges with ALS and feels like you're not being heard, I want to let you know that you are. And there are other people who are feeling what you're feeling, are affected by what you're affected. And there are people doing what they can to end it, not just sitting on their butts, just hoping it'll magically go away. Because there are people, and unfortunately there are people in departments meant to be fighting ALS who are doing that. Or it feels like that's what they're doing. If they're doing something, it doesn't feel like it. That's for sure. But, yeah. Anyways, this will be a quicker episode. And yeah, I just encourage you to keep following on, you know, subscribe if you're not already subscribed on YouTube. Follow on Spotify as well, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening from on the podcast side of things. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and like and share this with your family and friends, especially if you know someone affected by ALS and feels, you know, unheard or the issue's not being lit up enough. Make sure you share, make sure you subscribe, follow all you can as well on all my social medias as well to keep up to date on my fight with ALS and the issues being put on mute. And I hope we can continue together to get this show eventually canceled and don't have to talk about it anymore because it'll be too obvious. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next week. Continue cranking it up to 10 and continue to help me unmuting these issues. Thanks.